Have you ever quietly wondered if your body is trying to tell you something final, and no one is listening, not even you? A 2023 clinical report by the National Institute on Aging revealed that 88% of elderly patients showed at least one of 5 subtle warning signs within 12 months before their passing. But these signs rarely get attention, not because they are harmless, but because society has taught us to dismiss them as just getting old. That is why this video is not just another checklist. This is a wake-up call, rooted in real stories, backed by science, and built to preserve dignity and wisdom in life after 60. Because elderly wisdom after 60 is not just about living long. It is about understanding what your body whispers before it screams. Let me tell you about someone who reached out to our channel last month. Her name is Rebecca Clark. She is 73 and lives alone in a small apartment in Florida. Last winter, she wrote to us, "I used to love the cool breeze, but suddenly I could not warm up. I wore 3 layers in my living room and still shivered. My daughter gently touched my arm one morning and I pulled back. It stung like needles. I felt ashamed, like my body was turning against me." What Rebecca experienced is the first silent sign of approaching life's final chapter. Unusual sensitivity to cold, touch, or even light textures. And no, it is not just your nerves. According to senior health researchers at Johns Hopkins, this kind of sensory change is often linked to weakened circulation, lower fat reserves, and cellular aging in the skin's nerve endings. These changes are quiet red flags, not dramatic enough to panic, but consistent enough to matter. And here is what makes it dangerous. Most people chalk it up to poor sleep, mood swings, or getting older. But the truth is, your body might be telling you that it is struggling, and if ignored, you could miss your chance to respond early, find comfort, or even reverse some decline. So let me ask you, have you noticed someone in your life suddenly wearing more layers, flinching at touch, or saying that water feels like needles? If Rebecca's story made you pause, I invite you to share what it reminded you of. Whether it's something you felt yourself or seen in someone close to you, your perspective might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Because life lessons from the elderly are often hidden in the things we overlook. Rebecca told us something that stayed with me. She said the worst part was not the physical discomfort. It was the loneliness of not being believed. Her friends said she was being dramatic. Her daughter said she was just cold because of the AC. But Rebecca knew something felt different. Colder, sharper, quieter. This is what so many seniors experience. A shift that no one else notices. But their bodies know. And sometimes the body speaks long before the tests show anything. At the Mayo Clinic, specialists in geriatric care have observed this phenomenon for years. They describe it as a withdrawal from physical feedback, where the body stops reacting normally to temperature and pressure. In plain terms, your nerves go quiet. And when that happens, the end of life does not knock. It whispers. And I want to be very clear, this is not a message of fear. It is a message of clarity. You deserve to understand what your body is trying to say. You deserve to prepare with power, not panic. With peace, not confusion. When I asked Rebecca what she wished someone had done sooner, she said this: "I wish someone had just sat down with me and asked, 'What are you feeling that you cannot explain?' So now I ask you that. What are you feeling that you cannot explain? You are welcome to write it down, whether for yourself or to share with others who may be going through the same quiet questions. Sometimes just naming what we feel is the first step toward making peace with it. Here at Elderly Wisdom, After 60, we believe in senior wisdom. We believe that advice for the elderly is not just about pills or diagnoses. It is about reflection, dignity, and the power of naming what hurts before it becomes permanent. Many seniors tell us they feel something is off. They feel like something is changing. But no one is listening. So let this be the place where you are heard. And if you are watching this for someone you love, ask them today. Have you noticed yourself getting colder? Are soft clothes starting to feel rough? Have you pulled back from touch? These are not just signs of aging. They are possible signs seniors are dying. And understanding them can make the difference between confusion and connection. We will move into the next silent sign in just a moment. But if anything in Rebecca's story felt familiar, I hope you take a moment now to reflect quietly. Or share this video with someone who might need it. Because this is how elderly wisdom after 60 becomes a gift. A gift we pass on while we are still here. A way of saying, I see you. I understand. You are not alone. And that, to me, is the beginning of real healing. Sign number 2, persistent fatigue that does not improve with rest. Michael Donahue was 81 when he began skipping his morning walks. He had always been the kind of man who rose early and swept his driveway before the sun was fully up. His neighbors admired his energy. He mowed his lawn, cooked breakfast from scratch, and even led a senior stretching group at the local community center. But something changed. It started quietly. At first, he said he was just feeling off, a little slower than usual. Maybe the weather was to blame. Maybe he just needed a nap. But the naps multiplied. The conversations shortened. He started saying things like, I'm just tired today. And eventually those words became part of every day. His daughter Megan noticed that he stopped calling first thing in the morning like he used to. When she asked why, he simply said, I don't have much to say anymore. When Michael finally visited the doctor, they ran a battery of tests. Nothing looked too alarming. Yet he could barely walk to the mailbox without needing to rest. He had not returned to his stretching group in over a month. This is the second silent sign, the kind of exhaustion that sleep cannot fix. A fatigue that settles not just in the muscles, but in the spirit. And if you are over 60 or know someone who is, this kind of tiredness is more than common. It is often misunderstood. According to the American Geriatrics Society, persistent fatigue is one of the most frequently reported symptoms among older adults. But it is also one of the most underdiagnosed and underdiscussed. Why? Because we tend to normalize it. We say, of course you're tired. You're getting older. But what if that tiredness is not just a result of aging? What if it is the body conserving energy because deeper systems are beginning to shut down? Michael was not just tired from lack of sleep. He was experiencing a cellular shift. His muscles were not recovering. His circulation was slowing. His organs were working harder for less return. And deep down, he knew it. He told Megan one day, I feel like I'm sinking. Not drowning, just slowly disappearing. And maybe you know that feeling too. You sit down to rest and an hour later you're still there. Not because you're lazy, not because you lack motivation, but because something inside feels heavier than before. It is easy to confuse this with depression or seasonal changes. And yes, sometimes those do play a role. But when fatigue persists for weeks or months, when even simple tasks like brushing your teeth or folding laundry feel like uphill climbs, something deeper may be happening. This is not about alarmism. It is about listening. It is about noticing the difference between being tired and being drained. If you are listening right now and thinking, that sounds like me, or that sounds like my father, or that sounds like my spouse, take a breath. Sit with it. Ask yourself gently, what is your body trying to say? Have you lost interest in the activities you once loved, not because they are boring, but because they feel too demanding? Have your days started to blur together, not from confusion, but from sheer lack of energy? Has your voice softened? Has your sentences shortened? Please comment below so we can hear from you. These are the questions Michael never thought to ask himself until his body forced him to slow down. Fatigue like this is often linked to declining cardiovascular or respiratory function. When the heart and lungs are not delivering oxygen efficiently, the entire body feels the impact. It is like trying to run a marathon while breathing through a straw. Doctors sometimes miss it because there is no single test for this kind of tiredness. It requires careful observation, honesty, and above all, attention to patterns. So if you are experiencing this or watching someone go through it, start by creating space for slowness, not as a failure, but as a message. Michael eventually did that with Megan. They started keeping a small daily journal together, noting how many hours he slept, what activities felt easiest, what times of day brought the most fatigue. And through those small notes, they began to see the trend. His energy was lowest mid-morning. His speech slurred slightly after 2 p.m. And most telling of all, he had stopped whistling while he made eggs. It is often the smallest disappearances that matter most. You do not need to explain it in detail here. But if something about this story resonated with you, a moment that felt familiar, or a sentence that made you pause, take a second to reflect on why. Sometimes naming the moment helps us stay present with it. Here at Elderly Wisdom, after 60, we talk often about life after 60, not just as a stage of decline, but as a time of attention and grace. Fatigue that lingers is not a punishment. It is not laziness. It is not something you should feel guilty about. It is often the body's way of inviting you to go slower, to notice more, to rest in a way you may never have allowed yourself to before. And sometimes it is also the body's gentle way of saying, I'm preparing. I'm turning inward. I'm beginning to release. That is not a message of fear. It is a message of peace. When we accept it, when we sit with it, when we speak it aloud, we give ourselves and our loved ones the chance to walk together through whatever comes next. Michael never got back to his early morning walks. But he and Megan started doing something else. They sat on the porch together and watched the trees sway. Sometimes they spoke. Sometimes they did not. And in those moments of stillness, there was no panic, no diagnosis, just presence. And in many ways, that was the most alive Michael had felt in years. That is the quiet truth of this second sign. And it leads us gently into the third one, a change not in energy or sensation, but in the voice itself. We will explore that in the next part. But for now, ask yourself, what is the tiredness in your life asking of you? Maybe it is not asking to be fixed. Maybe it is simply asking to be heard. Sign number 3, subtle changes in voice and speech patterns. Linda Martin was 76 when her best friend called to ask why she had stopped attending Sunday brunch. Their group of 4 women had been meeting for nearly 2 decades. A simple tradition built on coffee, laughter, and the joy of growing older together. Linda answered the phone that morning, but her friend almost hung up. She did not recognize her voice. It was faint, rough, hesitant. A far cry from the cheerful warmth they all knew so well. At first, they thought Linda had a cold. But weeks passed and the voice never returned to its old strength. It began to crack mid-sentence, drift off halfway through thoughts. And slowly, she stopped calling altogether. This is the third silent sign we want to explore today. Not a pain, not a sensation, but a shift in how we speak, how we express, how we connect. Changes in voice and speech patterns are common in the final stages of life, but they are rarely recognized as warning signs before death. We often explain them away as fatigue, as mood changes, or even as just being quieter with age. But what if the voice is fading because the body is choosing where to spend its last energy? According to a study by the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, many seniors begin to experience reduced vocal power due to weakening respiratory muscles and changes in vocal cord elasticity. These shifts affect breath support, word clarity, and even the desire to speak at all. Linda told her daughter one evening, "I know what I want to say, but it just feels too heavy to speak. Sometimes it feels like the words are stuck behind my ribs." That statement stayed with me. Not because it is poetic, but because it is deeply human. The effort to speak is one of the most overlooked forms of physical exertion. It requires breath, diaphragm control, muscle coordination, and mental focus. And for a body that is beginning to slow down, that can be too much. This is why many hospice nurses say they begin to recognize decline, not by how much a patient eats or sleeps, but by how much they talk, or choose not to. Have you noticed someone you love growing quieter, not just introverted, but weary of speaking? Maybe their sentences are shorter. Their pauses are longer. Or they laugh less because laughing itself takes breath. These small shifts are often dismissed, but they can be profound. Think back. Have you ever heard a voice go hollow, a laugh become a whisper, a greeting sound more like a sigh? That is not always aging. That is sometimes the body preserving what little energy it has left for the essentials. And the voice is not just about communication. It is about identity. When our voice changes, we do not just sound different. We often feel different too. Linda said she began avoiding phone calls because she did not want people to hear how weak she sounded. She did not want her grandchildren to worry. But that silence built a wall. And eventually, even her closest friends said they felt like she was slipping away from them, one quiet step at a time. What we must understand is this. The retreat from voice is rarely about choice. It is often about capacity. And when we recognize that, we can begin to meet our loved ones with a different kind of listening. If someone you love is growing quieter, sit with them in the silence. Let your presence be louder than their words. Let your patience be your way of saying, "I still hear you, even now." Sometimes holding a hand is worth more than hearing a story. Sometimes noticing a glance is deeper than responding to a sentence. There is also a practical side to this sign. If you or someone close to you is showing changes in speech, it is worth checking on hydration, oxygen levels, and general respiratory strength. These are often linked and may be addressable in ways that restore comfort, even if not full vitality. But do not rush to fix them. Sit with them first. Because subtle changes in voice are not always cries for help. They are often quiet acknowledgments of change, of inwardness, of simplicity. If you feel like your own voice is changing and it bothers you, know this: you are not alone. And you do not need to apologize for becoming softer. Your wisdom, your essence, and your presence are still here, even in silence, even in a whisper. Linda eventually returned to brunch. Not every week, not always on time, and not with the same voice. But her friends made space for the pauses. They asked fewer questions and gave more hugs. And slowly the laughter returned. Even if it was quiet, even if it was shared through tears. So today I ask you this. Is there someone you miss hearing from? Is there a silence in your life that feels like it is asking to be heard? If there is, maybe this is the moment to reach out. Not to fix, not to explain, but simply to reconnect. A short message, a gentle visit, a few quiet moments together. That might be the most meaningful act of elderly care advice you offer this week. And if this story touched something in you, I gently invite you to share your own reflections below. What has voice meant to you in this season of life? Has someone's silence taught you something you never expected? Your story might be the one that gives clarity to someone else. Because what we share here is more than senior health advice. It is senior wisdom, passed on quietly from one life to another. And that brings us to our fourth sign, a shift in breath, in rhythm, in the very pattern of life itself. But before we go there, pause with me. Let us hold a moment for the voices we still hear in our hearts, even if they no longer fill the room. Sign number 4, subtle changes in breathing patterns. Charles Bennett was 84 when his granddaughter noticed something different about their phone calls. It was not his words that changed, but the way he paused between them. A little more air, a little less rhythm. At first, she thought he was just catching his breath. Maybe he had walked across the room or just woken up. But these pauses began to appear even when he was resting, even when he was still. Eventually, she heard something else too. A soft wheeze, a faint sigh, and sometimes silence where words used to live. Charles had been healthy for most of his life. A retired train conductor, he took pride in staying active and independent. But over the course of a year, his breath told a story his words never did. This is the fourth silent sign. Breathing patterns that shift in subtle yet persistent ways. Not gasping, not dramatic, not always alarming, but present, quiet, predictive. According to the American Lung Association, as people age, the lungs lose elasticity and the muscles that support breathing weaken. Over time, these changes may cause shallow breathing, longer pauses, and even disrupted oxygen flow to vital organs. Many seniors begin to sigh more frequently, not as a reaction to emotion, but as an involuntary attempt to regulate airflow. Others start avoiding long conversations, not out of disinterest, but because speaking feels like work. Hospice nurses often describe a rhythm called Cheney-Stokes breathing, a pattern where breaths speed up, then slow down, and eventually pause completely for several seconds before starting again. To the untrained ear, this pattern can seem strange or even frightening. But to those who understand it, it is one of the final ways the body adapts when energy becomes precious. Charles's daughter began to notice these shifts too. He no longer hummed while cooking. He no longer read aloud to his great-grandson. And he no longer fell asleep to the sound of his own soft snore. Instead, he grew quiet, still, watchful. When asked how he felt, Charles simply said, "I feel like my breath has weight now. Like I have to carry it, not just take it." That one sentence revealed more than any test ever could. Breath is life. And when the rhythm of breath changes, it is often because life itself is transitioning into a new rhythm. Have you noticed someone around you breathing differently? Not louder, not heavier, just different. Maybe they pause more when they speak. Maybe their chest rises slower. Maybe they sigh for no clear reason or stop mid-sentence, not because they forget, but because they are managing their air. These are not always signs of sickness, but they are often signs of shift. And when we listen with patience and presence, we can meet these changes not with fear, but with respect. Charles never panicked about his breathing, but he did begin to change his habits. He stopped rushing up the stairs. He chose the couch by the window instead of the one across the room. And he learned to speak fewer words with greater meaning. His family adjusted too. They made space for silence. They slowed their pace around him. They listened more closely. And they began to notice something beautiful. The pauses in his breath gave room for deeper connection. When his granddaughter visited one afternoon, she said, "Grandpa, you're not talking much today." And he smiled and said, "I don't need to. I feel heard already." There is deep wisdom in that. We often think breath is only physical, but in many spiritual traditions, the breath is sacred. It is the bridge between the body and the spirit, between this moment and what comes next. When the breath begins to change, it does not always mean the end of life is near, but it often means a new phase is beginning. One where stillness matters, one where presence replaces performance. So if you or someone you love is showing these signs, do not rush to fix them. Do not force conversation or correct the rhythm. Just be there. Sit close. Breathe with them. Let the room be quiet enough that you can hear what words cannot say. From a medical perspective, it is always worth monitoring these changes, especially if they come with dizziness, fatigue, or confusion. Oxygen levels matter, and professional guidance is helpful. But equally important is the emotional support that comes with simply acknowledging the shift. Too often, people hide their breathlessness because they do not want to worry others, or they fear becoming a burden. But what they need most is gentle reassurance that their breath, however soft, however slow, still matters. Charles once said to his daughter, "When you sit beside me, I don't feel like I'm slipping. I feel like I'm landing. Somewhere softer, somewhere quieter." That image has stayed with me. And perhaps it will stay with you too. You may not be able to change the rhythm of someone's breath, but you can match it. You can honor it. You can say with your presence, "I am here. I hear you. I see you." That is the essence of elderly care advice, not found in textbooks, but in moments like these. So as we near the end of life of this part of our journey, I invite you to reflect. Have you noticed changes in breathing in someone close to you? Did it make you pause? Did it help you listen differently? If it did, let that noticing be your gift. Let it guide how you show up in your next conversation. Maybe you do not need to fill every silence. Maybe your breath is enough. And if this part of the story brought someone to mind, consider sharing this video with them. It might help them recognize what they have been feeling but could not explain. Because sometimes the most powerful act of care is simply helping someone realize you are not going through this alone. That brings us to our final sign. A letting go, not of breath or voice, but of daily rhythms. A quiet fading from the routines that once defined life. We will explore that next. But for now, let us breathe together once more. In stillness, in awareness, in respect. Sign number 5, growing indifference to routine and personal hygiene. Edna Walker was 81 when her daughter first noticed the laundry basket had not moved in over a week. It was not that Edna had forgotten how to do the laundry. She simply stopped seeing the need. The same woman who once color-coded her closets and never missed her Wednesday hair appointment had begun wearing the same robe for days. Not with shame, not with struggle, but with calmness. When asked if something was wrong, Edna simply smiled and said, "I just don't feel like fussing with it these days." At first, her daughter worried she might be depressed. But Edna still smiled, still read her favorite poems, still enjoyed tea at sunset. She just no longer cared for the little rituals that had once filled her day. This is the 5th silent sign. A quiet turning away from routine, from appearance, from the external structure of daily life. And it is easy to misread. We often associate this kind of behavior with giving up or falling into despair. But for many seniors, especially those nearing the final chapter, it is not about sadness. It is about release. According to research published in the Journal of Aging Studies, as the body enters a phase of slow decline, it often shifts its focus inward. The desire to maintain social image or external rhythm begins to fade, making room for reflection, rest, and simplicity. Edna's daughter began to understand this the day she came over with clean clothes and found her mother sitting by the window. Her hair was a little messy. Her shirt had a stain from breakfast. But her face was peaceful. "I was watching the light," she said softly. "It looked like it was dancing across the wall." It was at that moment that her daughter saw something deeper than neglect. She saw presence. You see, the end of life is not always about crisis. Sometimes it is about subtle reorientation, about valuing being over doing. And that includes stepping away from the things that once seemed so important. Have you ever noticed someone you love pulling away from routine, stopped wearing makeup, stopped dressing up for dinner, stopped making the bed? These changes are not always a call for help. Sometimes they are an invitation to slow down, to witness what really matters in the time that remains. And yes, for some, it can reflect depression or illness. That is why it is important to look at the whole picture. Has their appetite changed? Have they withdrawn from joy? Or are they simply seeking peace over performance? Edna still laughed at jokes, still played music, still hugged her grandchildren. But she no longer chased calendars or schedules. Her daughter began to join her in that rhythm. They would sit on the porch in pajamas and let the morning happen, without a list, without a clock. And in those mornings, there was something profoundly beautiful. The simplicity was not empty. It was full of presence. As caregivers, children, or friends, it is natural to want to restore routine, to get someone back on track. But sometimes the track has changed. And the most loving thing you can do is to walk alongside the new, slowly, gently, and without judgment. If you are witnessing this in someone you love, do not rush to correct it. Instead, ask, what feels good to you right now? Or what would bring you comfort today? And if you see it in yourself, know this: you are not broken. You are not giving up. You may simply be entering a new season, a quieter one, a wiser one. This is not a loss of dignity. It is a return to it. Edna passed away one peaceful morning in her favorite chair. The same robe, the same book, the same sunlight on the wall. She left not in chaos or pain, but in stillness, surrounded by the simple things that had come to mean the most. And maybe that is the life lessons from the elderly. These 5 silent signs are not just senior health warning signs. They are invitations. They invite us to listen more deeply, to ourselves and to each other. They invite us to honor not just the life we live, but the way we let go. Final reflections. If you have walked with us through all 5 signs, then you already know this was not a video about fear. It was a video about clarity, about presence, about elderly wisdom after 60 that too often goes unspoken. You may have recognized these signs. Seniors are dying in someone you love, or in yourself. You may have felt grief or relief or simply reflection. Whatever arose for you, honor it. You do not need to fix what you have felt. Just notice it. Breathe with it. Speak it if you wish, or carry it quietly if that feels right. This is your life, and your story matters. If something in these stories touched your heart, feel free to share it with someone who might need it. A sibling, a neighbor, a friend walking through quiet changes who might not have the words yet. Because sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is not advice, but companionship. And if you feel called, you are welcome to share in the space below. What was one thing you learned from this journey? What will you carry forward? What will you now see differently? This is not just a comment section. It is a place of wisdom. A place to pass on what cannot be captured in textbooks or prescriptions. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for listening, for feeling, for being present. And wherever you are in your journey, whether you are slowing down or starting anew, know this: you are not alone. And there is dignity in every breath, every silence, every goodbye. May we all walk a little more gently with one another. And may we listen before the signs become too loud to ignore.